Hey everyone, welcome to this special surprise episode of the Caregiver Coffee Chat podcast. I am so excited about this. Rashawn and I have been working on this for a while, and so we're very excited about the conversation we're going to have today. And yes, we will finally spill the tea on what we've been working on. That's coming up later, but I am so excited to have Rashawn on because he is not only the co-founder of a website to help caregivers get resources that they need to manage their self-care and just feel seen and supported through their caregiving journey. But he's also been touched by his by caregiving for family members in his own personal life. So he has a lot to share both personally and professionally. And I'm so excited that he came on or agreed to come on the podcast. So Rashawn, thank you for being here. And I'm so excited for today.
Thank you so much for having me, Melissa. I'm really excited.
Absolutely. So for those of you who obviously may not follow you already on Instagram and have checked out the website and know about your work, can you share a little bit about your journey of being a caregiver personally, as well as what kind of led you to do that professionally as well?
Absolutely. So for myself, I've been a caregiver for my grandfather who lives with dementia and about 10 other chronic diseases for the majority of my adult life, and been managing his care with my mom. And sort of through my late teens, early 20s, I had the opportunity to explore ways that I could be able to support him and my mom in our caregiving journey, to be able to help him better manage getting to appointments, making sure that he gets his groceries, helping coordinate his day. And there weren't really a lot of options available or things that we could do to support him from a distance. He never lived with us specifically. And so alongside that, I was working in the tech scene in Toronto, and I had the opportunity to interact with health tech and to understand what up and coming solutions were, the people who were interested in making a difference for caregivers as well. And that kind of led me to start Memories, which was really focused on the early days on, sorry, there was a sneeze.
Oh,
Really
you're fine.
on the early days about supporting individuals living with memory ailments. And so we began with a chatbot company that was focused on sending reminders to individuals living with dementia and Alzheimer's to their personal device to help them get through the day. That was a really fun thing to design. However, we were able to realize pretty quickly that that wasn't serving the needs of the population we wanted, mostly because getting a chatbot message on a device might be alarming for somebody who is unaware of where that's coming from, as well as the heterogeneity of the disease. It was really difficult for us to be able to accurately create a solution that could help everybody. But what did come out of that was overwhelming feedback and support from caregivers saying that, hey, well, this might not have worked for my loved one. We need support. What are ways that you can help us get through the day to manage the appointments for our loved ones, to help us find social support? And that kind of got us on the journey of the first version of Memories, which we launched last year, and into building diaries, which we're doing today.
Awesome. And I'm so excited about that. And I speak backtracking a little bit. I really resonate with your story because I've had a lot of chronic illness in my family too. My mother was chronically ill for 50 years. So the majority of my life too, for all my life, actually all my life, she was chronically sick with multiple health issues as well. And multiple chronic health issues as a result of, cancer and her kidney failure and just respiratory problems. I mean, that's what eventually did kill her. But I understand that, from a young age. I saw my dad deal with caring for my mom while trying to raise me. And I get that. That can be so overwhelming. And it's frustrating too for the child because they don't know anything different. They don't know anything about having two healthy parents. I mean, we want that for our children. And I certainly wanted that for my daughter. But hey, hello again. My husband is chronically ill, and I do have two chronic illnesses myself. So our daughters know no different too, unfortunately. So that's tough. That's tough. And I think having types of support that really coincide with that, I think is really important because it's not just making sure that the medical needs of the loved one, whoever you're caring for, whether it's a parent, grandparent, spouse, or a child, that's critically important, but also the caregiver, because the caregiver is taking the load too, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And sometimes just being seen and having that support, even if it is something remote, like through an app like what we're talking about, the diary app that we'll get into a little bit later, is really important because like I talked about this morning in my reels, is that for people who are sick, the caregivers have to be careful too, because sometimes they have a compromised immune system. So needing to be home, isolate, and not expose yourself to the public as much because of the needs and the dangers of the person you're caring for with their immune system is a big problem and a big concern. So if that's the case, getting support remotely can be kind of hard. And obviously too, not everyone can sit on a Zoom call all the time either. I mean, I make time for my business, obviously, sure. And some of the programs I get support in, but not everyone really is in tune that. So I love what you're doing with the website and the apps, is that it can be from your phone. As bad rap I know as tech gets, in terms of being a caregiver and being on the go, I really live by stuff that I can, I can access on my phone on the go, because one hand I might be holding my daughter and dealing with her melting down, and then I'm also having to care for my husband if he has a seizure, and then I care for my aging father. I got my hand in multiple baskets here, and being able to do stuff that's accessible on the go, even if it's just 5 seconds, if I'm waiting, for my turn at the gas pump because it's busy, and I have a minute to like look at my phone to see a message that someone sent that said, "Hey, thinking of you." That makes my day. I need that because the days are long, mentally, emotionally, and physically. And so we need to just feel seen and nurtured. And I think that what you're doing is incredible. So when we're looking for, so let's talk about, besides maybe an app, what are some resources that have really helped you with your caregiving journey to be creative? Because let's face it, because here's the thing, guys, on this podcast, I want this to be a resource that gives you lots of ideas, okay? Because everyone's different. We all have different needs, different faiths, different personalities. And depending on the season that we're in our caregiving journey, you might need X, Y, and Z more than somebody else might need. So what in your journey, what were some things that really just helped you through your journey, Rashawn? Maybe we could share with our listeners that could give them some ideas.
Yeah, I think for me, it was identifying what could be kind of a code that I could live by, or things that I knew that I could do every day or try to do to make sure that I was like in an optimal state mentally to be able to continue on the caregiving journey. There were three things that I like tried to do in a daily practice. I think the first thing, which really informed what it is that we do with the company, was finding time to reflect every day. It's an intentional practice that I have, whether that's right before I go to bed, or in the morning the next day, to think about what happened the day previously or prior. I think it's super helpful to be able to not get caught up in like a month going by and not really noticing what happened and feeling all these waves of emotion and not checking in with yourself. So making that time every day, whether that's journaling for you, a meditative practice, or talking to somebody about your day, is the first thing. Second thing that I would say is super helpful, and I've tried to do, is to allow myself to be selfish. And I think that's a really tough thing for caregivers to do, but you need to identify ways that you can choose yourself every day or consistently to be able to prioritize how you're feeling. If you need a break, if you need to do something that'll be a treat for yourself, or if you need to reach out to somebody and say, "Hey, I'm really drowning here," it seems like your priorities sometimes may fall to the wayside as a caregiver. So I think it's helpful to be selfish yourself in this journey. And the last thing I would say is to reach out proactively to the folks who have made it clear that they're willing to help you. I think that there is often a sense of dread about bringing how you're feeling to someone else in your circle or your loved ones who you think might feel really bad about what it is that you have to say, or worried for you about how burnt out you might be during your caregiving journey. And that can make you haphazard about sharing that. But people are making themselves available for a reason. And it's a lot easier to give you support early on in this journey than really dark days when they don't have as much insight and clarity to be able to help you through. So if somebody's made it clear that they are willing to support, tap that resource, be selfish for yourself.
Absolutely. And I think that is the problem that we face as caregivers, right? Is we don't want to be selfish, hate asking for help until it's too late when we're tapped out and burned out, and then crap hits the fan. So this really does not work. So that's why I really teach with my moms. I'm really proactive about going, "Hey, guess what? I want you to have a plan now before it's crazy." Because also you might be having a good day now or a good week now, but that doesn't mean that it's going to stay that way. It's going to change. And so taking time now to create a proactive plan for yourself is so important. So, like Rashawn said, being selfish. What are those, like I tell you before, I'm going to say it again, those non-negotiable 15-minute blocks of time or 30 minutes or an hour every day that are your time for you? Personally, for me, nap time, because my daughter's only 4, so I'm lucky than some parents, I admit that she still naps. And you know what? That 2-hour window is time for me either to get a cat nap sometimes or even just to binge YouTube, okay? To do whatever I want. So that's my me time. 30 to 45 minutes in the morning, first thing when I come into my office, I have my devotional time because that sets the tone for the day. And then at the end of the day, like Rashawn was saying, I do some reflective journaling. I just have one page with some prompt questions and I do that. So reflection, checking in with your body and paying attention to what you need physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, tapping into resources and creating a plan for that resource right now. Investing money is not a bad thing for yourself. I personally am doing a year-long intensive with with one of my Christian life coaches. And I tell you guys, having that accountability with other women of my faith, as well as just having a plan for being held accountable for my wellness goals to make sure I am stopping and pausing to take care of myself. Hello, it's really helped. And then also just for me personally with my work, I really love being able to do these intentional conversations for you guys like with Rashawn who get it, who understand what it's like to be, well, Rashawn doesn't understand what it means to be a mom, but he does understand what it's like to be a caregiver for a family member at a younger age. I started caregiving for helping out and being aware with helping out around the house for my mom, at a very young age. And that translated into my career. I'm a former certified nursing assistant for 15 years, and it's trickling in, even though I'm not in the healthcare industry per se, practicing as an aide anymore. That training is very vital and inspirational for how I want to help and teach you guys in being a caregiver without medical experience. And Rashawn's doing the same thing. So I want you to have the permission here. We're both giving y'all permission here to be selfish, to take care of yourselves and be creative with what works. Have a mix it up type plan as well. Maybe on this day, if you need to spend a little longer, maybe journaling, because that's what you need, or being in prayer, meditation, practicing your faith one day, that's fine. But then maybe the next day, it's like, I just need to get out of this house. So maybe that is bringing up somebody in your support network and saying, hey, can you please come sit with my family for about an hour so I can get out of the house and go somewhere? I'm stir crazy. I need to get out. That is okay. Okay. That is okay. Just because you're home full time as a caregiver does not mean that you're not allowed to take breaks. And Rashawn, what are some other resources that you, in your experience, both maybe professionally and maybe personally, that in terms of like internet resources, that would be some good places that we could plug people in?
Yeah, I think what I like to do is you go to the AARP. Typically, I'll go to their website and go over what some of the resources that they have outlined for caregivers are. They usually do an amalgamation list of like some of the new tech that comes out for caregivers, applications, as well as they do these, I think it's every 5 years, and they try to do them more frequently, surveys of the current caregiving landscape in the States. And they're usually pretty long executive summary or briefs. The executive summaries are typically 1 page for the entire report, which is typically in the 50 to 70 pages, but I actually think it's super helpful to read, even though it's a bit dense, because it really outlines nationally what the situation looks like for caregivers. And it can help put in perspective that maybe you really aren't alone, that there are a ton of other people that are feeling this way. This is how it's affecting burnout. This is how it's affecting people's ability to work. And that in that document, they also outline areas of innovation or companies that are doing something that can be helpful. So it could be a really good way for you to see vetted resources if you're that type of person who likes to go through a bunch of data. The other way that I like to collect resources or understand what might be available is through Instagram. I think it's a fantastic way to connect with other caregivers, to sort of go through their content and their reels. People typically have a ton of life experience before becoming caregivers that is able to offer a really unique perspective to help you through your journey. And through that, you have the ability to interact with other people who are in a similar space, sending them a direct message and building that caregiver community, sort of the vertical social network that I like to build through Instagram. And I think kind of the last thing, that resource space that was super helpful for me was on YouTube. There was a lot of interviews that I saw, long form interviews of caregivers that were done previous to what Memories was doing in the past, where I was able to kind of feel like I was in the shoes of another caregiver for about an hour and understand what their journey was like, and really put into perspective that people are just figuring it out along the way as well.
Right. And again, digital resources and stuff from your phone. I mean, I'm not saying that I want you to be on the phone all the time, but when you're needing some research, on the go research, Instagram's at your fingertips, YouTube's at your fingertips, and it's on your phone, y'all. So definitely reference that, because they're becoming search engines. Instagram is really shifting. I've been on the platform 3 years now, and it's really changing to where you can literally just type in something and search for it, because they're trying to make it more of a search engine. YouTube has long haul has been a search engine. So you can type in caregiving, self-care, and tons of stuff will pop up, and you can get lots of resources that way, because even just, again, hearing from somebody their story, it just really resonates, right? Because you know that you're not the only one on God's green earth that is dealing with X, Y, and Z. And I think that's really important. And also, I would say too, another one I would interject that I tried, it did not work for me because of me being a younger caregiver at a younger age and with an illness that doesn't have a lot of, it still has a lot of stigma and misunderstanding about it, since my husband has epilepsy. But support groups via Facebook, there's a ton of them on there too. Again, the ones that I tried to shoot for just didn't resonate with me, because the standpoint for for example, like being a stay-at-home mom, it was more from the standpoint of moms who had made that pre-planned choice with their spouse prior to having children, that they would be a stay-at-home mom because they could afford it financially, or they just had chosen to make it work somehow because they felt that was important to their family unit. And I'm not disrespecting that, that's fine. And same thing like with chronic illness, it was more towards the person that was actually dealing with the illness. It wasn't for the caregiver. And I didn't find too many things on epilepsy over there either. So poke around. I mean, depending on what for those of you listening, your chronic illness story or chronic injury or whatever you might be facing is obviously different. So definitely look at those resources, look at YouTube, look at Instagram, look at Facebook, and see what you can get. And also be open to that sometimes the resources of support that you get may not be the traditional. Y'all, I get a lot of support from my business coaching group. When I was in the thick of just my husband getting diagnosed, that's when I had just started my journey with my business coach. And y'all, that group has saved my hide so many times, because there's actually moms in there who had, again, personal stories that weren't necessarily being, coinciding with their business online journey with their businesses. But in terms of just building friendships and intentional relationships, that was what helped, because they could talk to me about their experiences. And that made me feel, again, seen, less isolated, and knowing that I wasn't the only one dealing with this. And there's a lot more caregivers out there than what you guys think. It's just kind of getting creative with figuring out a little part of the internet or the world, and building your support network circle that you just have to kind of figure out. And it takes time. Sometimes it can take time. And I know that's aggravating, but it is part of the process, because statistically, guys, you will be a caregiver within your lifetime because of the age demographic. We anticipate caring for and having to make caregiving choices, end of life choices for our grandparents and our parents. That's a given with being a child ourselves at some point. But for caregiving, though, in terms of younger kids and our spouse, that's something we don't anticipate, especially statistically, Rashawn, under the age of 65, right? Typically, we're thinking more and conditioned more society-wise to that end of life again scenario for aging parents and aging grandparents, not because of the age demographic. We just know that's going to come down the pipeline at some point. But even so, that in itself can be really frustrating and isolating. And like other resources I would tap into, guys, I know long-term care facilities are tough and no one wants to put them in there, but even if you don't want to put them in there, you can put them in there for just a respite for a week if you need a break, because then that way your loved one has 24-hour care, they get their meds, they're medically trained, they have supervision, and you can have a break because they run 24/7. Also too, home health, hospice, leverage their aids for grocery shopping, light house cleaning, ADL care, so dressing, feeding, bathing, PT and OT. And also I would recommend too, like Sean, we think about the grief and the trauma that comes with being a caregiver, and the anger and the frustration, the grief of this is why this is happening to our family or our loved one, and the anger of like why it happens. And we all feel, I know I went through that. I don't know about you, but a social workers are key. They're all long-term nursing facilities have one. We live when my dad had to do a stint for a while because of his health. I leveraged that social worker to a T to make sure we were advocating for my dad, and that was so helpful. And then also too, if you're using home health or hospice, like what we had to do with both my mom and my grandmother, we leverage that social worker too, because they can average, they're kind of more trained to handle the logistics of the rules for making sure that their wishes are granted, but also just helping you cope. They're just a listening ear. They're there to support the family as you're dealing with these changes. Because it's hard to see your spouse decline. It's hard to see a parent or grandparent decline in health, even though it's coming. It's hard to take. It's a hit. And having a safe place and someone who's trained to deal with that situation can be a lifesaver. Because let's face it, not all of us are psychologists or counselors. And again, that's a resource in of itself. Counseling, you don't have to have anxiety or depression or schizophrenia or something like that to see a counselor. Counseling is a great tool because it's neutral party, right, Rashawn? It's neutral. It's a third party. They're not close to the situation. So you can be angry, you can be frustrated, you can vent it out. And they're trained also to not with just medication, although I have been on medication, it helps, but they're also trained with just having an understanding on healthy coping techniques to help cope you through it. So Sean, when you were going through your journey, what kind of resources did you leverage? Did you leverage a social worker? Did you leverage counseling? Or were some other third-party support systems that you leveraged?
Yeah, for me, I think I've leveraged the support of social works later on in my caregiving journey to figure out what might be the best placement for my grandfather moving forward, and things that similar to what you were discussing. There's a great Instagram caregiver, Compassionate Caregiving, and she has a lot of fantastic resources, which I was able to access over the last couple of years. But I think prior to that, more in line with what I was discussing earlier with reflection time daily, I've accessed counselors fairly regularly over my adult life. And I think that's been a real positive benefit in my life, where it's a space and an opportunity to be able to be transparent with somebody who's trained in a way to be able to let you get out what you need to and help direct you along the path to find what it is that you need in the conversation, whether that's just an outlet to let out your emotions and anger and fear, or if that's a place where you need to look for support or ways to move forward. Counselors and therapists and psychiatrists are really helpful to be able to do that. And I think the only issue that a lot of people have is access to these individuals, depending on where they are and whether they're rurally located or within this urban city center. And so thankfully, over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of advances in online access to therapists, whether that's programs like BetterHelp or others. And I think that's really helped revolutionize and democratize access to therapy for everyday individuals, including caregivers.
Oh, say that one again. Better Health. What was it called?
BetterHelp.com.
Betterhealth.com. And that's specifically an online
Online
counseling
therapy.
and online therapy. That's awesome.
Mhm.
And is there, because obviously as caregivers, I know for us with our family being on a fixed income, is there a fee associated with that, or is it, or do they have like a sliding scale? What is your
Yeah,
knowledge
I
of
think
that?
there's access to discount codes that you can find from various brand ambassadors, whether they're advertising on YouTube or Instagram, but there is a fee, and that's really the biggest barrier to any psychiatric care is the fee for service.
Mhm.
Unless you have an insurance coverage through your workplace or educational institution, that can be a barrier to access.
Do they take, I'm talking to my caregivers here. So I'm thinking caregiver, I know for us, Medicaid, Medicare, we're in that boat. Do they take Medicare or Medicaid? Do you know?
For BetterHelp specifically, I'm not sure if they do.
Okay.
For most psychiatric and counseling care, the answer is no, depending on whether it's specialty oriented. But for some instances and for some more disadvantaged rural communities, there are access to Medicare and Medicaid funding that they can provide to be able to cover the cost of that therapy. But it would really be a hyper-local approach I would recommend for your caregivers to identify wherever they are currently located, what resources
Yes.
they have, and if it's going to be covered by the insurance that they have, and if not, what their options might be, because it'll vary different wherever you're listening.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, pay attention, guys. I mean, obviously, what works in one state may not be the rules in another. So definitely check your insurance, research what you have access for. And even if it isn't, whether it's an online resource or something local, make sure you ask those questions. That way you're not hit with an allotment of money that you cannot afford. So definitely ask, like, do you take my insurance? It's okay to ask, do you take my insurance? Or even if they don't, a lot of the times people will know the rules and other businesses and places of service that do offer that resource. So it's okay to, if they say no, say, okay, do you know of a place that offers services that will take my insurance? Because they lots of times no. I've had to do that with my daughter, even for her dental with our insurance of going, hey, we don't take your insurance, but check out these places. I think they still do. Hey, and then at least you have a phone number that you can call and start that process and conversation. Absolutely. So Rashawn, we've been upping this for so long about what we've been working on. So let's segue into that. So what have we been working on? Well, as you've heard, Rashawn and his team have a website called memory.co, and they're working on apps. They're very heavily specialized in apps to get apps into the hands of caregivers that are accessible in terms of giving you support for both self-care, tips, and just whatever demographic of caregiving that you're at. And Rashawn, I'm going to let you take it away. You know more about this than I do, but I'm very excited about collaborating with you on this project. But tell us a little bit about the Diaries app that we've been that your team's working on, and that I am coming alongside to help promote and collaborate with on.
Yeah, so for us, for Diaries, this is really the culmination of about 1 to 2 years of prototype testing, MVP testing, and release of the Memories application, and then feedback gathering from caregivers and conversations and survey data that we collected, where we launched the Memories application for caregivers of those living with memory ailments in early 2021, really focused on doing 3 things: connecting folks to other caregivers asynchronously, similar to a Reddit-like forum, additionally tracking caregivers' moods on an everyday basis, and then having the ability to assist in task reminders. We launched that application and we were really surprised by the results that we got. One, there were caregivers that were tracking their mood every day. Outside of that, caregivers were additionally writing long form diary entries or text-based entries into the application, recording the entire day that they've had thus far. Sometimes caregivers were telling us about their entire week, and we had no idea that that was something that was going to happen, or this would be a behavior that could be encouraged by the application. The other point of feedback that we got was that caregivers were not necessarily looking for an asynchronous way to connect, but a synchronous way. Whenever they need support, when am I going to be able to talk to another caregiver? Hopefully it's immediately, and we can do that through your application. So we took all of that in mind to design Diaries, which is the first vertical social network for unpaid family caregivers. What that really means is that it's going to be a place for you to come together to find caregiver resources and tips, and be a place to track your mood. And within that application, you'll be able to build a community of other caregivers who are looking to do the exact same thing. Through that community, you'll have the opportunity to chat one-on-one, to do group messaging, and interact with each other through a post-like system similar to Instagram or Facebook. The best part of the application, I think, is the fact that we're expanding outside of caregivers of those with memory ailments to anybody who identifies as an unpaid family caregiver. A lot of that has to do with inbound requests that we got from the Memories application for individuals who are taking care of children with disabilities, for example, or parents of those with chronic diseases outside of memory impairments, or spouses who might have just recently got a transplant and are now caregivers themselves. So this will be a gathering place where you can come, track your mood, write a long form diary entry and record your day. And you can either save that privately and build that repository for yourself over time, or share that diary entry into the community and have that be a jumping off point where you and other caregivers can discuss immediately how you're feeling, get that social support. And along the way, we'll be tracking the trends in your mood, the things that you're telling us, and providing you insights for the first time and what burnout might look like for your caregiving journey and what are the things that have been bringing you a lot of joy thus far.
I love that. And I love the idea that you specified unpaid family caregivers. Okay, because here's the thing, guys. I am professionally trained. I had professional training for 15 years as a professional caregiver in the healthcare industry. And I'm thankful for that. And Rashawn's had that too in the tech world. But still, the average person does not have, not everyone is a nurse. Not everyone is a doctor. Not everyone's a PT therapist. Not everyone is a CNA. You know, caregiving has many layers and there's many different things that you have to learn skill wise to do it. Okay. And so having a place where you can ask questions from other people that are struggling and don't know what the heck they're doing is so important. Okay. Yes, from my standpoint with my work, I do, and Rashawn's work, you know, we both try to use our professional training to help you, okay, in your caregiving journey. That's our passion. Okay. But at the same time, we know that having intentional conversations from someone that maybe isn't professionally trained is just as important, because you just need to feel seen. You need to know that, okay, I'm not the only one that's struggling with raising a 4-year-old and caring for a sick spouse and dealing with aging parents all at the same time. Okay, there's another person on the planet I know that's dealing with that, but finding the way, like we said, was when we talked about earlier in this episode, other places to find and connect and build your support network. That's the problem. And again, thinking about the average family caregiver who's on the go, does not have time to always sit at their computer for intentional conversations like what we're doing here on Zoom right now. It's so important. It's so important. And so what is the easiest, fastest way that we can get a resource like that into your hands and make it accessible to where 24/7, someone's always probably in there. Someone's up late because their spouse or their aging parent had a fall or had to be sent to the hospital, or they're up with sick kids, they're chronically ill kid, or maybe you yourself are sick and you're not feeling good and you're crying out and you need some support. That's what we hope the diary app will be for you guys, is that it will give you that place to both intentionally focus on your mental, emotional, and spiritual self-care. You know, like I talked about earlier about pausing. Journaling is great. It's been a lifesaver for me. I've become such a journaler in my caregiving journey, even more so in a more in-depth way than I did when I was older, when I would just keep diaries or journals for the heck of it. But it is a good way because the page is your friend, or this app, however you want to choose it. It's a way, journaling is a way for you to just get it out. You can be as angry, as sad, as frustrated as you want. You can cuss it like a sailor and no one will know. So it's important that you have that outlet. And that's why we're so excited about this app coming out, hopefully later this summer is our hope and prayer. So that way you have a accessible 24-hour, 24/7 accessible resource to help you through your caregiving journey. And I really love too, like that this is just the starting point. I had the chance to be interviewed by Rashawn and give feedback as well. So I'm putting my heart and soul into this project too, guys. I'm giving my feedback. Because the things that came out of it too is like we want it to be eventually to grow to where you can have a targeted listing of like what age demographic you are as a caregiver and other specifics like that.
Different
Again,
groups.
yeah, groups,
Application.
specific illnesses, topics, so if you are dealing with epilepsy, for example, using myself as a guinea pig here, that is a chance that you can know, okay, I need to talk about someone about epilepsy, or I'm dealing, or motherhood, or there's all these layers, but again, it takes time. So, but we're just excited. We're excited, guys, that this app is at least in the works, and that it will evolve and it will grow. Okay, this is not the start. This is not the end. This is just the beginning. And for those of you who do sign up for the wait list, I want you to understand that you will be giving feedback as we're going through this process, and you're on the wait list. You will be giving feedback by what you share, because Rashawn and the team will be reaching out and asking, like, I'm sure, what do you like about the app? What do you want to see? How can we make it better so we can make this the most accessible and best product on the market in terms of giving unpaid family caregivers like us, like y'all, the chance to be seen, to be seen, to be validated, to have resources in your back pocket. Because here's the thing, life experience does become a resource in of itself in our own journey, and sharing that with someone else, other people, is vitally important, guys, because we want other people to have the same wins and the same resources that we have, or to have the breakthroughs that we had maybe a little sooner even, so they're not going on the struggle bus as long as we did. So Rashawn, where can people sign up for the diary app?
Oh, well, thank you for that. I think for us, there's two main places that I would say to go ahead and sign up, and that would be the Memories website, which is www.memories.co, as well as our Instagram page, which is our Memories. And the link is in the bio on the Instagram page, or you can sign up directly on our website. And as Melissa mentioned, we're gearing up for a summer launch of this year, but along the way, we'll be sharing our prototype with the folks who are on our wait list, so that we can get feedback, be able to understand if we're meeting their needs, and hopefully get people excited to join our community as soon as it launches.
Okay, yeah, and stay tuned. Sean will be back. I'm going to have him back for another episode when we have a better idea of when the actual drop date is. So definitely be sure to check out the show notes below of where you're watching this on Anchor, Spotify, YouTube, my Apple, wherever you're watching. Check out the show notes, because I will link the website and Rishawn's Instagram below. So either place you want to go to sign up, get on the wait list today. So that way, when it drops, you're good to go. And we can, and in this way too, when it the prototype launches too, you can be able to start getting the chance to get feedback and get out, because the more eyes we get on this, guys, the better. So we know how we can best serve you in helping you through your caregiving journey. So Rashawn, at this point, do we have a more ironed out date of when we think the drop date will be in summer, or is it still kind of to be determined at this point?
Still to be determined. I would say we're aiming for summer, just so that we have the opportunity to test the app internally before we give it to our caregivers, to make sure that we can work out the kinks. Hopefully sooner, might be later, but we're aiming for summer.
Okay, yeah, well, another thing that if you want to be in the loop about what's going on with this special project, which I'm so excited about, Rashawn, I'm so excited I get to be a part of this. This is so exciting. So be sure to follow me on Instagram at Melissa Miller 2011. Follow Rashawn and the team at memory at Our Memories. Again, our OurMemoryz. Follow both of us on Instagram. We will be dropping details on our reels, stories, and be sure to just follow our websites too, because we'll both have information up there as well for that. So be sure to follow us there for details. And stay tuned to the podcast. Make sure you're subscribed, because I will be doing another episode with Rashawn once closer to when we have the drop date. So that way you guys will know for sure officially when the drop is happening for the Diaries app. So Rashawn, we've talked a lot today. I know you gave some tips for earlier, but what are three other actionable tips you want to give our listeners if they're just kind of even just starting out with realizing, maybe from the place of burnout? Okay, let's face it, it's not easy to admit, I'm burned out, I'm tapped out, I need help, I have no clue of where to start. Because like you said, the tips you gave earlier, I see more as kind of a place of where you've maybe already got something established, like, a reflection routine in the morning and evening, and you already have your support network, so you know who you can call to help you. But if you're just starting from scratch, that can feel kind of overwhelming and heavy. So what are 3 simple actionable steps we could give our listeners to help them get started with building their support network from scratch, with less overwhelm, with less stress?
Yeah, I think it'll actually be what I might say is onboarding into caregiving. And I think there's a couple things that you need to do. The first would be to actually understand the disease that you're serving with your individual who you're taking care of through a vetted resource. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend going on a WebMD search or anything similar, because sometimes those pathways can be a little bit overwhelming. But wherever you were able to understand about the initial diagnosis of your loved one, whether that was a a physician or a care extender or anything similar, have a discussion with them, whether you want to do that alone or with the individual you're taking care of. Just get as much information as you can that they feel is relevant so that you have an understanding of what you can expect over the coming years, what the spectrum of the disease you're serving might look like, so that you can start framing your reference of what it is that you're seeing and how your loved one might change in front of your eyes, and really having some of that information stored from somebody who's vetted would be the first thing. The second thing that I would say is, if you are working at this period of time when you've become a caregiver, do your best to save for an emergency fund. I think the amount of costs that come up with caregiving is pretty unexpected, and it can be alarming very quickly. So if there's any ways that you can allocate some funds in the beginning when things haven't gotten quite severe or as bleak for yourself, you might really thank yourself down the line for that. The third thing that I would do is, for anyone who you do feel comfortable that's in your social circle, I would update them on the new change in your life. That's not necessarily an ask for help or anything similar, but it's making it clear that you are becoming a caregiver, maybe for the first time, and that there'll be differences in what it is that you'll be able to commit to. Your time is now going to be allotted to someone else a little bit more. You might not be able to make as many events. You might be a little bit overwhelmed at times. Your response rate might be a little bit different in messaging. And I think setting that expectation early on can do two things. It can take a lot of pressure off of yourself to maintain as many relationships as you were doing previously. And two, it can give insight and empathy into the other people who are in your life, that things are different for you and they might be willing to help you. And those, I would start with those three.
I love that. And I want to highlight the third one, because that one just really spoke volumes to me. Okay, with building our support network, we need support. But with building our needs and our self-care, because the two are intertwined, boundaries. Like Rashawn said, boundaries. You're going to be committed to your loved one more, spending more time being committed to your loved one, right? So you're not going to be able to commit to as many things. And that is not selfish. That is okay. Okay. I don't want you tapping out and burning out with overcommitting to more stuff than what you can take on, because your plate's full, y'all. And especially speaking to someone who deals with chronic illness, I wake up every morning and obviously I pray and I'm like, Lord, please let today be a smooth day. But you never know when the other shoe's going to drop. Okay. You really don't. And so you need to live your life structured. I know with chronic illness, you can't totally plan for what's going to happen every day. So that's why it's kind of important to have some boundaries in place about how much you're going to take on, how much you're not going to take on for the season that you're in. And also just leave your day open-ended. Have those non-negotiable times, even if it shifts throughout the day, non-negotiable times of things that you need to do to take care of yourself. That's first and foremost, because you don't want to tap out and burn out. So for me, it's hydration, 90 ounces of water a day, 15 minutes of movement, my devotional time in the morning, and then reflection time in the evening. Nap times, my me time to get a little bit of a break. You know, those are non-negotiables for me. Now, is it always at the same time, exact T through T every day? No. So there's the open-ended aspect. But then at the same time, having those boundaries in place of making sure I get that, but also boundaries with people that are in your support network. If they ask you to do something and you cannot do it because you have too much on your plate, it feels heavy, it feels overwhelming. And regardless of what their reaction is, that's going to be on them, guys. Say no. Okay. It's okay to say no. And it's okay to ask for help, but it's also okay to say no. And like Rashawn said with that last thing, let people in your life know what's going on. Family group text, I've had to do that too. You know, like there's been times where and people don't know. I've had conversations with family as they've been understanding like what I'm really dealing with, for example, with epilepsy, and it's not really, understood and researched enough, and there's a stigma around it. People don't know. And I had a family member the other day tell me, I'm glad you shared this, Melissa, because now I know more. I'm glad you shared this stuff with me. They don't know. And so it's okay to educate them and say, hey, this is what I'm dealing with. I have a lot on my plate and I cannot deal with more. And, and that puts them in the headspace of like, what can I do? Even though they may not be able to deal with the caregiving aspect, they can lighten your load, maybe with a break every now and then for a chance for you to get out of the house, maybe help pick up groceries, maybe help with house cleaning. Maybe they have a resource for where you can get help for insurance, or getting help with housework, hiring out, at a cheaper rate, someone to do housework for you, or yard work, since you physically don't have the time, the space, the energy to do that. That's something we've had to do. We've had to outsource both of those because I'm caring for 3 people. I'm running a business. I have my own chronic illnesses. And, my husband can't do yard work anymore. My dad can't do yard work anymore because they don't physically have the energy to do it. And being out in the heat, especially during the summer, is not a good idea anyway. So we've had to outsource those. And there's nothing wrong with that. Investing money and time elsewhere into getting stuff done and also taking something off your plate is not a bad thing. It's a huge form of self-care. And I do not want anybody to feel like that's a bad thing, that they're a bad wife, mom, caregiver, person, daughter, son for doing so, because it is critically important that you take time to do so. So Rashawn, we have the wait list for the Diaries app that's available. Are you besides the website and Instagram, are there any other places that you would like to let our listeners know where they can follow you and your work?
I think you can check out our YouTube page as well, where we have a series of caregiver interviews that we've done in the past, where we discuss what the journey is for you as a caregiver and ways that we can support you in the future. And there's I think over 50 that we've compiled with caregivers that we've met on the various social media platforms. So if you're interested in long form content, we'll check out YouTube, and the link to that is also on our website. Other than that, I think Instagram and our website is the place to get the most information. But I would say, if you have any questions about us as a company, what we're doing with Diaries, or would like to share a caregiving story, you're welcome to email me at any time. My email is Rishawn, RISHAWN @memories.co. Available anytime to chat.
Okay, awesome. Well, Rashawn, I am so excited that we've met, that we're getting to do this collaboration, and that we're having the chance to help people. That's at the heart of it. And I really am appreciative that you've been brave to share your story, to use your own experience of caregiving and your amazing skills with tech. I'm not techie, I need to be, but I'm not tech driven. That's been the one thing with during my business that has been a struggle bus for me. I even struggle with Zoom, guys. So yuck. It is so exciting to see what you're doing. And I wish you and the team so much success in the years to come. I hope this is not the only time that we will be working together and collaborating together, because I know we can both benefit each other. And for those of you listening, I hope you understand that caregiving is not like a horrible life sentence. Okay, it's a struggle and it can be a challenge, but you're so much more than just being a caregiver. You're so much more than just being a mom. You're so much more than being a spouse. You're so much more than just being a son or a daughter. You are a unique, talented, beautiful individual that has gifts and talents, and taking time in your self-care to share those is just as important. So Rashawn, as we close out, what is something that we have talked about in our conversation, or maybe something that's just really resonated with you in your caregiving journey that you would like to end our conversation with, that can be a little ounce of extra hope and encouragement to our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, the currents of this topic really have run through this entire conversation, but I've also encountered it with other folks in the caregiving space and interviews that I've done. And that really has to do with the resilience that caregivers seem to build upon day after day, where it can be really tough and cumulatively tough to be a caregiver for somebody who you've loved. The term that people use is dual role strain, where you're a provider of care and also still fulfilling whatever relationship you had with that individual, whether they were a parent or a spouse, and dealing with those competing interests can be really difficult and draining every day. But caregivers are finding ways to wake up every morning to continue to do this, to be able to build resources into their life. And it's really motivating. And they're doing this without typically financial compensation or enough resources from local and state governments to be able to support them. So I think that through the caregiving journey, it's daunting and harrowing, but caregivers that I meet and interact with on an everyday basis are finding ways to succeed and build personal character and resilience in amazing ways. And that's really inspiring for me, and is the reason why I continue to build in this space.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think that just coincides really good with my devotional this morning, because it was the story of Esther, and the verse in the Bible, it was Esther 4:14. It talks about you were created for such a time as this. Guys, as caregivers, moms, wives, sons, daughters, you were created for such a time as this. I know it's daunting. I know it's scary. Esther was up against her own battle. She was looking at being killed for even just being of Jewish faith. The king could have easily put her to death right then and there, but he didn't. And she chose to be brave and stand up for her people. And even though we may not be facing, like, the annihilation of a whole race, we are facing so many challenges as caregivers, as moms, as sons, as daughters. And I want to let you know and remind you as well that you are resilient. Like Rashawn said, you were created for such a time as this. You know your spouse, you know your children, you know your parents, your grandparents, whoever you're caring for, and their illnesses and their struggles better than anybody else. That makes you the right person for the job. And you can stand tall in that truth. You are resilient. You are stronger and tougher than you know. And I know some days it feels like that's not the case, but you are. You are tough. You are resilient. You were created for such a time as this, and it is possible. And you do not have to do this alone. Okay, Rashawn and I got you. We're in your corner. Rashawn's with the tech stuff, trying to get you resources that way. I'm your coach and mentor. Between the two of us, we want to get resources into your hands to help you and be successful and be able to not burn out and tap out and be able to cope with this journey in a healthy way, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, guys. That is the whole reason we get up in the morning to do this for you. Okay, so be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to the Caregiver Coffee Chat podcast. Follow Rishawn on his website and Instagram so you can get on the wait list for the Diaries app. We will be updating you as soon as we have more information about when it's going to be dropped when we get a little closer to the summer. And as always, if you are in a season where you're really struggling and maybe you need a safe place to vent and it really wigged you out on trying to go to a counselor or therapist, I offer free support calls, guys. And this is just a free place for you a free space for you to just cry, vent, shout, cuss. I don't care. 30 minutes for you to unplug and for me to also help curtail a realistic motherhood and self-care and caregiving routine for you that works around the unique challenges that you're going through. And a link will be below in the description box as well for you to access that if you are in need of that. So I will see you next time on the Caregiver Coffee Chat podcast. And Rashawn, thank you again so much for being a guest today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Take care, guys.